A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honour her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate.
Hey everyone, my name's Jai for those who don't know me. If you want to keep that passage open in front of you, Proverbs 31, that'd be helpful. Well, a couple of weeks back when I began kind of doing some work on this talk, we're looking at the topic of marriage today. And when I started doing this work, I ended up getting chatting. We had a tradie doing some work at our house, and he was a bit of a talker. And he started telling me a bit of his life story, some of the significant events of his life. It included the fact that he'd been married, he'd then been divorced, he'd subsequently been remarried. And as he was telling me his story, it just dawned on me how significant marriage is in terms of the kind of story of our life. And I think really for most of us here this afternoon, as you think about our life, as you get on in life, that will be true. Whether you're someone here who has been married and that hasn't gone well for you, that would be significant. Whether you're someone who's currently married and maybe that's going well or maybe that's difficult. Whether you're someone here this afternoon who is not yet married, maybe that's been a deliberate choice. Maybe that's been something that you'd like to be married, but that hasn't happened yet for you. But I think whatever our situation this afternoon, those choices or those experiences that we've been through with regards to marriage, they will be significant in terms of the narrative of our personal life. And that means this afternoon, as we come to consider marriage, that I realise and I understand that as we talk about this topic, for many of us, we're kind of touching on areas and points of pain, personal pain for each of us. I mean, the thing is you kind of think about marriage this afternoon. We're going to be looking at the Old Testament book of Proverbs. That's what we're looking at through this Rich Relationship series, the first part of the Bible. And in Proverbs, I mean, I want to be honest with you, it pulls no punches as it talks about this particular topic. It's honest, it's real, and that can be quite refreshing, but it may also be cause for pain for you. But I want to encourage you to bear with it, because I hope that as we get to the end of the talk, as we consider all that Proverbs has to say to us on this topic this afternoon, we'll see that there is also much grace, much wisdom, and much that is good and kind of kind in a sense from God in this book. And so keep that in mind as we work through this afternoon. It will be a bit of a longer talk, so just to prepare you for that. Some of the questions we're going to be seeking to answer are, what makes for a rich marriage relationship? For those who are not yet married, thinking through how do we actually go about, or what do we think about as we're pursuing a marriage partner? How do we think about marriage healthily before we're married? And if you're someone here this afternoon for whom marriage didn't work out, trying to think through in that, how do we process that experience that we've been through? What do we learn? Where might we find hope? And so let's pray as we come to think about that topic together this afternoon. Father, we come before you, Lord, and we do thank you for your kindness that you do speak to us. Father, as we've recognised, this is a topic that is close to many of our hearts and is significant for many of us in our lives and our personal stories. And so, Lord, we do just pray that you would deal with us gently. Father, give us truth as well. And Father, we pray that you just allow us to know you better through what we do this afternoon. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, as we talked about last week, the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, it's largely made up, as the title suggests, of Proverbs, or as we talked about it last week, of these things called aphorisms, which is just another name for a proverb. That's talking about trying to condense truths that's all boiled down to these single-line statements that speak about the reality of our world. They give us wisdom about how we ought to live in a way that's fitting with our world. We talked last week how that's a bit different to a lot of the rest of the Bible, which follows stories and narratives or speeches. And something else that we talked about last week, which will be significant for us to keep in mind today, is the fact that Proverbs consistently is written through a male's eyes. We talked about the fact that this is a book that's written from a father to his son, and oftentimes to the son about women. And we talked about the reason for that was partly due that the son is the one who is seen in the Bible to go off. He's going to be the one who starts a new family unit. He will be the one setting the values and the identity of that family. But we did talk about how it's still appropriate for us to apply Proverbs through a woman's eyes, even though it's written from that perspective. But my hope is this afternoon that we'll get to also see some of the richness that comes from the fact that it is ordered in that particular way from a father to a son about women at many points. So the first principle I want us to consider is the principle that our marriage partner, if we are married or if we get married in the future, our marriage partner will shape our experience of life deeply. So one proverb which captures this very nicely, I'll put it up on the screen, I think you've got it in your outline as well this afternoon. Proverbs 12 verse 4, it says, "A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones." There's lots to unpack from that verse. It talks about the thing to aspire as a wife, or really as a husband as well, is to be a person of noble character. That's what it's calling us to. And on the other side, that's contrasted with being a disgraceful husband or wife. And as we work through this afternoon, through Proverbs, we'll get to see unpack what that means, what that looks like to be a person of character, and what it looks like to be disgraceful. But I want to move straight on and see what this verse is saying about the effect on our lives of this person who is our marriage partner. You notice here that if you're married to someone who is a wife or a husband of noble character, in this particular verse, obviously it's focusing on the impact of a wife. It says that the impact will be that she will be like a crown to her husband. And it's this picture of something that is high, it's outward, it's visible, it's something that the whole community can see. There's an honour for the person who is married to a spouse of noble character. And in contrast to that, the other picture that we're given is that if you're married to a disgraceful spouse, the language is that they will be like decay in your bones. It's a very graphic image, isn't it? In contrast to the crown, which is high, it's outward, it's visible, this decay in bones, it's something that's deep, it's inward and it's invisible. There's a real sense that this is saying that if you're married to someone who is disgraceful in some way, that the pain that they cause you will be something that others don't necessarily see. That is something that you will feel that others won't be necessarily aware of. And really what this is putting to us is this principle. Your marriage partner will deeply shape your life for good or for evil. And as you keep reading through Proverbs, you see kind of flesh put on that particular principle. On the positive side, if I can just look at one passage, actually the passage that we had read out for us before, Proverbs 31. So if you've still got your finger in that passage, open that one up. There's a whole section at the end of Proverbs devoted to a description of the wife of noble character and the impact that she'll have on a husband. I just want to pick up a few verses from that. So Proverbs 31 verse 10. It says, a wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. And the passage goes on to speak about her productivity, this wife of noble character. It talks about her care for her own family, her care for her servants, and even her care, as you keep going through that passage, for the poor and the needy in verse 20 there. And then if you pick it up in verse 23, it says, her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom. And faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. And her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. And so we see here this picture of a married partner who conducts herself or himself with character, with wisdom. You see a picture there that this is the kind of person who is deeply concerned for others, for their own household, for their servants, for even the poor and needy in their particular community. They're teaching others, they're generous. And you can see some of the impact for the husband in this verse. He trusts her. She does good to him. He is honoured in the community because of her conduct. And of course, in contrast to that, as you keep reading through the Proverbs, is that just as great as the impact of the noble wife or the noble husband, will so on the other side, the impact of the disgraceful wife is deep and profound. A few more verses up on the screen. So Proverbs 19, verse 13. It says, a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping of a leaky roof. Trying to soak up the imagery that's been just sort of put down for us here. Proverbs 21, verse 9. It says, better to live on the corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife. It gets worse. Proverbs 21, verse 19. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. I mean, it's kind of humorous, isn't it? But it's actually speaking about a situation of deep pain, isn't it? It's not an acute pain. No, it's a chronic pain that kind of builds and just gets to you to the point where you want to run to the desert. And there's this deep picture that your marriage partner will shape your experience of life. And do just notice in those verses the kind of nature of the disgraceful husband and wife. They're the quarrelsome person. That's a word that's used repeatedly through those verses. They're nagging. They're disgraceful. And it's kind of said as a bit of a joke sometimes. Particularly a man will get asked what was the happiest day of your life, and they'll kind of say a little bit tongue-in-cheek, oh, my wedding day, of course. You see, what Proverbs is putting before us this afternoon is that's actually true in a deep and significant sense, that our wedding day is significant, but maybe not for the reasons that we might think. Now, Proverbs is saying that day is significant because it will necessarily impact our experience for the rest of our life with that person. And so I would say to you here this afternoon, if you're someone who is not yet married, and this is saying to you, go into marriage with your eyes open. Realise that as you marry someone, they will deeply shape your experience of life. That will be the reality. It means that you've got to be aware of what you're looking for in a marriage partner. You shouldn't be looking for their outer appearance. And that's kind of what our culture holds up. If you think of that picture of a group of guys sitting in a bar and kind of leering at a girl and saying, look at her. And that's kind of our culture's picture of how you pursue a partner. But Proverbs is saying that if that's the way we conduct ourselves, we're actually headed for potential great pain and harm. No, instead we should be looking for the innocent. Looking for someone who's generous, who's not quarrelsome, who's not argumentative. It's kind of funny, isn't it, in our pornified culture, a lot of these very characteristics that are described with the disgraceful wife, they're actually held up. I mean, we like pink, which is really just a glossed up way of saying disgrace. We like the person who can kind of stand up for themselves and who has a little bit of spice and cut against the system. It's kind of just a way of saying quality. And the most important thing, I think, if you're someone here this afternoon who is not yet married, the important thing to take away here is that you ought to be seeking to be the kind of person who is going to bring this sort of joy and honour to your potential future marriage partner. To pursue this noble character, to pursue generosity towards those around you. I mean, not that you need to be kind of Mother Teresa or something like that, but with the resources that you have, are you looking out for others? Are you pressing against the self-centeredness that's in our country? Are you pursuing that kind of deep practice? And for those of us here this afternoon who are married, who are currently married, I hope that for some of us here this afternoon, as you've heard the description of the deep shaping impact that your marriage partner has on your life, I hope that as you've heard the positive side of that, that at least for some of us we can kind of utter a hearty agreement to that sentiment. We understand that from our experience with our marriage partner. And can I say to you, if that's your situation, you think of your wife or your husband in those kind of positive terms, actually lock that thought away and make sure you tell them tonight. Praise God for them too. And yet Proverbs is saying that there will also be amongst us this afternoon those who can resonate deeply with the negative that Proverbs gets us through and the deep pain caused by a disgrace. And to be honest, I think what Proverbs is putting before us is that there'll probably be a bit of both in most marriages. And if you kind of hear about that kind of pain that Proverbs puts before us as a possibility within marriage, you can kind of get to asking the question, well, is it better that we actually don't marry to avoid that pain? And as you raise that question, there's various paths that we can begin thinking down. We might get to thinking, well, maybe it is better that I don't marry, that I don't pursue a marriage partner, I don't pursue relationships, I just don't go down that road. And actually, the New Testament would say to us that that's something worth considering. In fact, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it actually, he goes further than that. He says it's actually better not to marry. He talks about the value for the Christian person who doesn't marry. It will mean that they avoid some of the pain that the Proverbs are talking about. They will be freed up to pursue the Lord, to speak to others about the Lord, and to serve Him. And yet for some of us, as we kind of raise that question, maybe it's better to not get married, it can send our mind thinking down other paths apart from that one of just not pursuing marriage at all. For some of us, we'll begin thinking about how we might receive the goods of marriage without the bad. Obviously in our culture, it's very prevalent that people would kind of get together and move in together before they kind of pursue marriage. That's one potential other path to try and grasp hold of the goods of marriage. Others don't even want to go that far in terms of commitment, just kind of dip in and out of relationships, sort of grab hold of some of the goods. Or for those who are already married and who are feeling that deep kind of pain that they weren't maybe prepared for it, there can be thought to divorce or even adultery. And as you consider those different paths that we can begin thinking down and that people in our culture are following, I mean, Proverbs would say to us that to go down those paths, apart from going down the path of saying no to marriage altogether, that's a legitimate and appropriate path to pursue according to the New Testament. But those other paths, Proverbs would say, in trying to avoid the bad of marriage, we're actually taking hold of something much, much worse. And particularly in Proverbs, it's very strong in the picture that it sketches for us of the deep came to the one who would pursue adultery. And I would add to that, in the New Testament, that the Lord Jesus, as he speaks about divorce, he talks about the person who would pursue divorce. I'm not talking about the situation where there might have already been adultery in a marriage. That's a very different situation. But for the person who would pursue and initiate divorce in a marriage where there hasn't been adultery, Jesus would put that in the same category as adultery. Matthew chapter 5, verse 32. I know that might raise questions for us, and very happy for us to have a discussion and chat about that at the end. But if you look at Proverbs, as it talks about adultery, it says that there is great potential for harm, that there will be harm if that's the path we pursue. Many places we could look at for that. I just want to turn to one passage in Proverbs chapter 7 in verse 6. If you wanted to turn that up, that would be helpful. I want to look at, this is actually an extended kind of story. It's not a proverb as such, but I think it's helpful for us to consider Proverbs chapter 7 and verse 6. Proverbs 7 verse 6. It says, "At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men, a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her," talking about the adulterer, "near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house, at twilight as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She is unruly and defiant, her feet never stay at home, now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner she lurks. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with brazen face she said, 'Today I fulfilled my vows, and I have food from my fellowship offerings at home. So I came out to meet you. I looked for you and have found you. I have covered my bed with coloured linens from Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till the morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon.' With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. All at once he followed, like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose, till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her path. Many are the victims that she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death." And I mean, there's so much with that little story that you could pull out and think on and reflect on, and we should think and reflect on. If I can just touch on a few. I mean, you've got to notice with the adulterer how attractive she makes this proposal sound to this young man. I mean, get the fact that she even pictures this adultery as a holy thing. She says that she's fulfilled her vows. She has her fellowship offering. She's using the language of Israelite worship of Yahweh. Kind of baptize this act as a holy thing. She goes on and tries to make out that there will be no consequence. Her husband's not home. He's gone on a long journey. There is no cost to this act, she says. And finally, she obviously paints it up as a very appealing proposal. She's dressed to kill. She talks up the setting and the surrounds of this this sexual kind of encounter. But of course, Proverbs puts before us what is actually going on. It says what is actually happening in this act is that this young man, I mean, he's not heading into a situation where there's going to be kind of decay in his bones. No, Proverbs is very clear. He is headed for death. It uses the picture there of the kind of animal being trapped in a snare. Verse 27, it says that the house of this lady, as this young man heads there, he thinks he's going for this great pleasurable experience. He maybe thinks he's going there for relief and refreshment from the stresses of life, or maybe his own marriage. But instead, verse 27 tells us that he's actually on a highway to the grave. Her chambers, as he enters into her bedroom, that is the place of death. And I mean, Proverbs, as it speaks about this, it obviously has in mind death, just not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. It has in mind the fact that we will all face the Creator God in the end and give account for our actions. It is in that sense that this man has entered to death. And really the picture here is that just as our marriage partner will shape our life, either for good or ill, well, this is saying that if we kind of take marriage into our own hands, we try and get the goods of marriage without actually entering into marriage. Well, it's saying that we too will shape our life, but it will be for the worse. And as you get to thinking about one of those other pathways that I mentioned, the pathway of kind of meeting a person, moving in with them, and kind of pursuing the goods of marriage in that way, cohabiting, rather than actually following that through to marriage, or maybe not doing that straight away. I mean, in the same sense, we need to understand that as we make that choice, as we try and take hold of the goods of marriage in that way, we are necessarily saying no to marriage, but we're also saying yes to something else. And there's been a book written in the last couple of years. It was the content of the book was first published as an article in a legal journal. It was written by some professors at a law school in Princeton University in the US. And then they wrote this book, and it's partly engaging with the current debate about homosexual marriage. The book's called What is Marriage? The details of it are in your bulletin, so you can go and look that up to give life more details. But it's a secular work, it's not a Christian book, but they're engaging in that homosexual marriage debate. I want to be clear up front, I'm not wanting to give a full kind of response or a full thought to homosexual marriage today. I think that is a really important topic for us to consider, especially with the debates going on at the moment. And so I do want to come back and consider that question specifically at the end of November in our 1 Corinthians series, or we'll pull it forward if the plebiscite vote happens before then. But today I'm just wanting to look at this book. It will touch on the homosexual marriage debate, but I'm really wanting to look at it mainly for the purpose of how it explains and unpacks the nature of marriage for us. But in this book called What is Marriage, the writers put forward this argument that what they're really saying is that actually the debate about homosexual marriage, it's just actually tracking the change in our view of marriage that's actually been going on for many, many years, at least as far back as the mid-70s, when no-fault divorce was passed and legislated. It talks about that change, that shift that's been going on. It sketches out two different views of marriage. It talks about where we move from and where we're moving to. The one view is what they call the comprehensive view of marriage, and that is where you have a union of will. So a man and a woman, they make a decision to enter into marriage willingly. They consent together to enter marriage. That's a union of will. There's a bodily union. That's the sexual aspect of their relationship. And marriage in the comprehensive union is ordered towards procreation, having children. And so because of that, it's necessarily ordered towards the good of society. There's kind of a benefit of society in the setting up of marriage. And it's permanent. It's exclusive if you enter into a comprehensive view of marriage. That's the view. And the writers talk about the view of marriage that we're moving to, as we move away from the comprehensive view of marriage, is what they call the revisionist view of marriage. And in the revisionist view, marriage is all about an emotional union between two people. Two people say that they love each other, and so they get married. And as long as there's still that emotional connection, as long as they still love each other, you see in that view of marriage, the faithfulness, the commitment between those two parties is essentially dictated by the individual desires of the What the writers of this book say is that as we move from the comprehensive view of marriage towards the revisionist view of marriage, which of course legislates homosexual marriage, we're continuing down that pathway from writers of the book say that there's actually there's a deep problem that we're actually selling out on something very good, and we're actually getting something which is worth that we make that trade. And they talk about a few of the different impacts. They're kind of well-researched factors and kind of facts that they're bringing out in the book and taking into detail. Kind of almost too much detail for me, but they got the main ideas. Some of the things they pulled out is they talked about the benefits of a comprehensive view of marriage. They talked about the benefits to the marriage partners themselves. I mean, there's been studies done that because of the exclusivity and the permanence of a marriage relationship, the marriage partners themselves, if you're a married person, then you're happier, you're healthier and wealthier. That's just the statistics. They go on to talk about the impact of children. When you have children who are raised by two biological parents, there's better, it's better for the children on the whole raft of different reasons and scales. And finally, they talk about the impact on even our view of friendship in our society. If we continue that trend in the comprehensive view of marriage towards the revision. It might sound a little bit strange. How does it impact friendship? We'll try and unpack that for a second. The thing is, if you take on the revisionist view of marriage, it's all about kind of the degree of an emotional connection. Well, the great problem with that is that it actually makes an emotional connection within friendship, a non-marriage relationship, it makes that less acceptable. Whereas when you have the comprehensive view of marriage, that's very different from friendship. It's about a union of will. It's about a sexual union that's ordered towards procreation and having children. And so it kind of preserves this different thing, which is friendship. And so it enables people to have both the marriage relationship and other deep friendship. And the big point in all of this is, as I said before, that as we choose to say no to one thing, as we say no to the comprehensive view of marriage, and as we move towards something else, then we must necessarily see that is a choice for something worse. That's what they're trying to say in the book. And so really, why I'm trying to bring all this up is just that point that as much as our marriage partner will shape our lives, we too will shape our lives by the decisions that we make if we try and take hold of the goods of marriage without actually taking on marriage itself. And I mean, really, the impact of walking away from marriage as an exclusive and permanent relationship and that kind of view of marriage, it should be obvious that actually undermines the very goods that marriage gives us. You think about Proverbs 31 and that wife who is kind of generous and so productive and giving towards the poor. I mean, the very foundation that enables her to be like that and to produce those goods which brings her honour to her husband are that exclusive and permanent commitment that has been made between the two of them. And if I can kind of put it like this, I'm not very mechanically minded, and so if something breaks down at our house, our car or our TV or our computer, I'm not going to go tinkering with the bits under the bonnet or open up the kind of computer and try and fix things, because I will just make things worse. And in fact, I have an example of this. At home at the moment, I roast my own coffee, and I use this cheap kind of popcorn maker to roast my coffee. The last popcorn maker that I had broke down. How hard could it be to try and fix it? So I took to it with a screwdriver. Let's just say it ended up in the rubbish bin in a much worse situation and condition. The thing is, when it comes to marriage, we need to be very careful. If we think we can kind of just overturn the wisdom of the ages, of the generations that have gone before us, God's wisdom, which is sown into the very creation, the wisdom even of the scientists, who says that if we start tinkering with the way marriage is set up, we do so at great risk of harm to ourselves. So what this means for us, I mean, if you're someone who's married here this afternoon, if you're experiencing some of those negative impacts that the Proverbs put before us, saying to us we need to be very careful how we seek relief. There is a great danger that we will actually make things much worse if we try and solve the problem ourselves. And likewise, if you're not married yet, maybe you'd really like to be married and that hasn't happened for you. Well, again, we've got to be very careful, taking things into our own hands, thinking that we can grasp hold of the goods of marriage in our own way, through our own methods. It might seem like there is nothing wrong or nothing that could go wrong in the moment. Proverbs tells us that there is nothing further than this. So what do we do? If we are suffering in marriage, what do we do? If we really would like to be married and that hasn't happened for us yet, what do we do? If we actually thought that we'd made a good choice in the past and we now realise that we've made a great mistake, what does Proverbs say to us in that situation? Well, if you get to look at what Proverbs has to say, it talks about the fact that it's not just your marriage partner who will shape your life, it's not just yourself, but actually God really wants to shape your life for your good. In fact, even the fact of, if you are married here this afternoon, the fact that you have a marriage partner, Proverbs would say that is because of God. Again, if I can just flash up two quick proverbs, two short proverbs. Proverbs 18:22, it says, "He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favour from the Lord." And then Proverbs 19 verse 14 pushes this even further. It says, "Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord." In that verse, to be prudent is very similar to being having wisdom, having character. It means you care for people. It means you're acting in a way that fits with what's going to be coming in the future. Did you notice there how it says that if you have a husband or wife, and particularly if you have a husband or wife of good character who is prudent in that, well, that's actually a gift to you directly from the hand of God. And yet as you consider that, you could very quickly ask the question, well, how does this actually help us? I mean, if I want a husband or a wife and God hasn't given that to me, how does that fact help me? If my experience of marriage has not been a good one, what does that mean for me? And to kind of dig into those questions, that's where we need to get to thinking why it is that Proverbs has actually ordered male and female relationships the way it has. Because you see, the thing is, as you work through the book of Proverbs, there are two women who feature prominently through this book. The first woman is Lady Wisdom, a personification of wisdom as a woman, kind of calling out to you. That you would come and receive wisdom from her lips. There's this picture of Lady Wisdom. And the other prominent woman is Lady Folly. She's the adulteress. She's the one speaking deceptive and unreliable words. It's this personification of folly, also calling out as a woman. And it's interesting, as you read through the book of Proverbs, there's actually a bit of blurring that goes on as you read about actual women and actual wives and husbands, and as it talks about these personifications. There's points where it's very hard to tell. Is Proverbs actually talking about wisdom, or is it actually just talking about a wife? Or is it actually talking about folly, or just an adulteress? And you get to see that even in those passages we've read out. Proverbs 31 with the wife of noble character, there's kind of that blurring between the personification and a real woman, and likewise in Proverbs chapter 7 with the adulterous wife. The big point is that Proverbs puts before us that to have Lady Wisdom, to grasp hold of Lady Wisdom, is to have something even better than a noble wife. If I can just read one section which talks about that. It'd be helpful if you turn it up, Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 13. It says there, Proverbs 3:13. It says, "Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For she," there you get the personification, "it is more profitable than silver, and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honour. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and those who hold her fast will be blessed. You see, it's saying here that to possess wisdom, to take hold of lady wisdom, is to have something even greater than a wife or a husband, even of noble character. And the picture here really is, as you keep reading through the Bible, as you get to the New Testament, as we considered last week, I mean, this is what God wants to give us. You see how Lady Wisdom here, I mean, there's talk of silver and gold, the great preciousness of this wisdom. The New Testament, written after Jesus Christ stepped foot on this earth, it tells us that God wants to give wisdom to us freely. He has given wisdom to us. We looked at last week, James chapter 1, verse 5. Ask God for wisdom, and he will generously give it to you. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 30. We consider the fact that God's already given wisdom. Jesus Christ, given for us. And so the message of Proverbs really is that we need to just take hold of it, grasp onto Jesus. And the amazing thing in this, the thing of note, is not that about our grasping onto Jesus, our clinging to him. No, the amazing thing in this picture is that Jesus is actually there for us to cling to with his wisdom. And the thing is, as you read through the New Testament, it would have been much, much easier for Jesus to have stayed off in heaven with his Father. But instead he chose to come down. He dwelt with us. He lived with us. And our grumbling, our quarrelsomeness, our folly. And it caused him decay in his bones to the point, in the New Testament says, he ended up on a cross, strung up for us. And the thing is, he went through all of that for us in our place, but he did that he might be that crown on our head, that he might be wisdom to us, this great precious gift that has been given. I have an illustration. It's a bit of a dodgy illustration, but you can kind of imagine a situation where you have a kind of bunch of grapes in your hand, and you're picking through this bunch of grapes, and you find that there's some good grapes in amongst this handful of grapes you have, and there's also some bad ones. And if you've ever had that experience of kind of picking out the good grapes and the bad grapes, you can get kind of frustrating. You can be tempted to kind of just throw it away. But just imagine with that handful of grapes, and this is where I'm kind of pushing the analogy a little bit, but imagine that you pick up one of these grapes, and it's actually not a grape, it's a precious stone. It's worth more than kind of acres and acres of fields of vineyards with the most luscious grapes. And if you had thrown that handful away, you would have missed out on that precious gift. You see, Proverbs tells us that marriage, and really all of life, it's a little bit like that handful of grapes. There's good bits and there's bad bits. That will be our experience. But the crucial thing that it tells us, the crucial thing that we must not miss the gift that God has given us of his wisdom in Jesus. And the message of Proverbs is that we cling on to him. And so I'd say to you this afternoon, I mean, whatever your situation, whether you're married or not, or whatever your situation is, I mean, I'd urge you to that, to receive him, Jesus, the one who stuck in there for you, who went through death for us. Grab hold of this wisdom of God. Nothing could bring us greater joy, greater fulfillment, greater riches in this life and the life to come. And the thing is, as we live our lives for him, as we take hold of him, as we live our lives for him, I mean, if you are married, and God has given you a marriage partner, I mean, praise God for that gift that he has given you. Work hard. I mean, seek to be the husband or wife of noble character. But the picture here is that the best way to do that is to grab hold of Jesus' wisdom. Jesus has God's wisdom. Hear what he has to say. To put it into practice. The thing is, even in the worst situations that we can imagine. I mean, even if we're married to someone who has kind of brought great grief to us, whether we're not married and we desperately like to be, whatever the situation. And even if you're in a situation where your husband or wife has been taken from you, has died, or you have experienced demise, I mean, that's hard. That's really hard. But the picture here is that nothing can take Jesus from us as God's wisdom given. In the end, I mean, we need to see that marriage is not the final reality. No, a relationship with God through Christ. That is it. I began this afternoon asking that question. What makes for a rich marriage relationship? What are we to think about as we would maybe like to be married and as we pursue marriage? What about if marriage hasn't worked out for us? How do we kind of process that? And what we've seen is that the Proverbs tells us that marriage and our marriage partner will necessarily shape our life experience for good and for ill. We've seen that we can shape our life experience as we make choices to try and take hold of the goods of marriage outside of the marriage covenant and agreement, and that will always end in a worse situation for us. And yet finally we've seen this picture that whatever has happened, whatever our situation, whatever we've done, and even if you're someone here this afternoon who has committed adultery, God's gift is the same to you. He has given Jesus for you to forgive you, but as his wisdom, that you might have the riches of life that Proverbs speaks of. And so really the crucial thing, the most important thing for us here this afternoon, is that we keep on listening to Jesus. That we keep on pursuing what he says as the most important thing in life, which is his word. And tangibly, the way that we do that, we read the Bible, we pray and ask God for wisdom. Do what you do now. Come along to church. Hear the Bible taught. Talk to other Christians. See what they think Jesus is saying to you in your situation as you sit down and look at God's word together. Listen to Jesus. Make your commitment to him. And that is the path to rich relationships. Next week we're going to continue thinking that through, thinking through this wisdom that God has given us in Jesus and how that relates particularly next week to situations where we're actually in the authority position in a relationship, and we'll be thinking that through with reference to the foundational authority relationship of parents with their children. So that'll be the last talk in our rich relationship series. But for now, I'm going to pray, and then I'll open it up if anyone has any particular questions I'd like to have a chance to. Father, we come before you this afternoon, and Lord, we thank you for your word.